The next thing that I wanted to touch on was some unit economic requirements for first order profitability, because I think we could start to map out over the next 10 to 15 minutes actual concrete numbers that you really have to be hitting at a baseline for you to even be first order profitable. If your main acquisition channel is going to be paid ads, which, let's be real, 90% of e-com brands, their main acquisition channel is paid ads.
Yep.
I think we can talk about average order value. I think we can talk about more specifically contribution margin on first order, which is probably the more specific metric to look at. Could then talk about gross margin and then also CAC as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to average order value, why I say I think it's more important to look at contribution margin too on first purchase is because at the end of the day, average order value doesn't mean anything. What matters is the margin made on the order if we're looking at becoming profitable on first purchase. And so yes, we could maximize average order value and get your average order value up 2x, but if there's no incremental increase in margin on the order, there's no point, unless there's some really long tail strategy that you have in the back end where you're trying to move more units to therefore have your product in more houses or something like that. But it starts to get away from just the core of unit economics and building a brand using concrete numbers. So if you're looking at first order profit contribution, I think that you really need to be operating with at least $50 to $60 of profit contribution, and that's AUD, so you can convert that to USD and it'd be about 35 to 40 on first purchase, or else it's going to be very difficult to self-liquidate right out of the gates if you're about to launch into ads. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to achieve a CAC below $35 to $40 when you have no pre-existing customer database, when you have no product in anyone's houses, so you're getting no word of mouth purchases that's going to artificially deflate your blended CAC number. And it's all coming through direct paid channels. And the reason for that is a really, really basic calc. And it depends whether you're going to use Google or Facebook as your primary acquisition channel. That's going to change the calculation. But let's say you're using Facebook. Your CAC on Facebook simply is your conversion rate divided by your CPC. And so you need to drive conversion rates up or CPCs down, one or the other, and your blended CAC improves. Realistically, a CPC out of the gate is probably going to sit at about $1. Once again, this is Australian, USD is about 70 cents. And conversion rates out of the gates, depending on your average order value, you're probably going to sit at about 2 to 3%. And so that's going to land your blended CAC at about $40 to $50. And so if you don't have $40 to $50 of margin built in to first order, it's going to be very difficult to be first order profitable in the early days until you start to achieve escape velocity where you can drive blended CAC down to a more sustainable number at about $25 to $30. And you could build that into your modeling. So you could have an understanding that, hey, out of the gates, we're not going to be profitable, but we're going to assume that blended CAC is going to gain efficiency as we get product out into market. But there's some baseline numbers that I'd throw out there.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. And then when you base your economics on that blended CAC of, let's say, 40 to 50 Australian dollars, then you got to go towards shipping and say, okay, so shipping costs us this much to fulfill one unit, for example, in an order. Doesn't make sense for us to pay that much if we can try and push customers with an incentive to add one more unit, because the change in CAC is non-existent, right? The customer is still the same. You're still acquiring the customer. And shipping is just an incremental or marginal increase in shipping cost of, let's say, 50 cents to $1, depending on whether you work with a 3PL or in-house warehousing. For in-house operations, there is no increase. Only on the shipping side, might be slight increase because of weight changes, but it's probably marginal as well. So once you price, you price marketing, then you price shipping into that, then you make a decision on how you want to approach your offer to first-time customers, and should you incentivize them to buy more units in that order so that you generate more profit contribution dollars without impact on customer acquisition cost and shipping fees, because again, there's so little there. It's the only truly variable costs in that case when you add more units are your COGS because you're selling more units, more products, and your transaction fees because your AOV goes up. But the shipping, it is variable because you won't incur it unless you sell a product, but it's a marginal increase per unit that customers add to their cart. So you keep that in mind because I see a lot of brands make that mistake. They say that the variable cost is a percentage of their AOV, which is not, right? It is a percentage when you only add 1 unit per order, but once you add more units per order, the relationship to, or the percentage of AOV goes down as each unit gets added to the cart.
Yeah, I say that all the time, which is people just use averages. I feel like the rule should be you should never use an average in any ecom. Like it should always be understanding the data that is informing the metric rather than just pulling a metric and then just applying it to the whole business. Because if you take, we have 40% gross margin because that's what it was the last financial year. It's like, okay, but how have the SKUs changed? Because gross margin differs at not only a SKU level, but at a units per transaction level. And so you have a cohort of customers that are actually sitting at 70% gross margin. And because you're not splitting out the data, you can't get the understanding of why don't we just optimize to this kind of customer rather than just averaging out and being happy with 40% gross at the end of the year.
Totally. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I have an interesting example of this, which is, so you said units per transaction, increasing incremental units in a transaction so you get economies of scale in shipping fees and all other associated variable costs. There's also immediate cross-sells and upsells in-cart, post-purchase, and through post-purchase email flows. And the interesting example, which ties directly into this, I think I made a LinkedIn post about it 3 months ago. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, which was back about 2.5 years ago, I was selling patio heaters. And I was selling patio heaters because I identified during COVID that all US restaurants could continue to operate as long as everyone was outdoors. And if you're outdoors, you sort of want a patio heater. You don't want to be in the cold. And so there was a shortage of patio heaters in the US. And pretty much the whole of the US sold out. And so I imported about 500 of them and sold out in a week, 2 weeks, at a blended CAC of maybe $10. And these are $1,000 AOV products.
Yes.
The funny thing was that my margin was nothing. Like it was absolutely nothing because of the MOQ and importing into the country. I had no idea what I was doing. So I incurred all of these costs where my gross margin ended up being probably about 10 to 15%. And so on a $1,000 product, I was making $100 to $150. Also because the shipping cost was so expensive, shipping these things around the country. And I had no idea of how to restrict state targeting so that I minimized shipping costs. I was just shipping anywhere across the country. I didn't care. And so what ended up happening was I was only really making in contribution profit when we minus off CAC about $100. And so after I sold about 10, I got 2 emails which said, do you sell patio covers as well? Because it's going to be outdoors. And I thought, let me go source one of these. So I went and sourced some patio covers on AliExpress for $7 a unit, landed cost, to the customer, drop shipped directly with 5-day shipping times. And I layered that in as an immediate cross-sell in a post-purchase email flow, which said, hey, I noticed that you didn't put a patio cover in your order, but all of our customers do. Maybe you made a mistake. Here's the link. I'll give you 40% off. And I priced it at $150 and I discounted to $99.
Yeah.
And so I was making the same profit on the cover upsell than I was on the $1,000 patio heater.
Yeah.
Just by building in an assumption that, hey, everyone orders this, you should have it in your cart. And because they were price anchored at $1,000, a $100 edition wasn't that bad. The incentive was there with the 40% off. Yeah. And I doubled the profitability overnight with really not much change to revenue. Revenue went up like 10%, but profitability doubled. Yeah. And so it sort of goes to show the importance of having those cross-sells immediately after first purchase. Because even if you have a 20% take rate or a 10% take rate, it's 100% margin because there's no cost on getting that upsell because you've already bought the customer.
Yep.
And so if you end up dividing that contribution margin across the, let's say, 10% take it to 10 orders, you end up becoming so much more incrementally profitable across the entire cohort.
Agreed. Yeah, that's the power of economics, right? And that's why I see such a missed opportunity when brands don't have in-cart upsells and cross-sells. That just hurts my eyes. And I think, we've gone so far in the e-commerce space that this is a necessity for every brand. It's no longer just a optional add-on, right? Because you're making money on repeat customers and upsells and cross-sells. Now it's really difficult. Again, we've gone over why. Because again, you got to be very competitive in the space. And even if you do all these, adjustments to your offer and economics for first purchase profitability, you will likely still not make as much profit. So you have to play with cross-sells, upsells. And if you don't, just missed opportunity for profit generation at that level.
Thanks for watching that video. If you want a free growth evaluation from us, where I go into your Google and Facebook ad accounts, create a 1.5 hour video, and then run you through a roadmap of how to continuously improve performance month on month, click the link in the description below, reach out to us on our website, bluesencedigital.com.au, and we'll book in a call.